2007. Anna sold her 5-year financial planning practice in 2010 and created Joy Sprout Productions to consult with cause-driven leaders in organizing their events that unleash joy and creativity in community. She brings a unique perspective. Not only has she lived abroad in Italy, South Korea, and visited Africa, Costa Rica, and Qatar, but she has also been trained as an artist, a violin performer, a financial planner, and has published a children's book with over 5,000 hours of leadership training and development. She lives in Montlake Terrace with her husband and her 3-year-old toddler. Please welcome Anna Choi.
So there I am. I'm sitting on my couch reading the book, David Corton's Agenda for a New Economy. And I'm thinking, Eureka! I found it. He has just coined a term in this book called sustainable happiness. And he has a blueprint for how we can actually build an economy, not just based solely on profits, but on human happiness. And thus, the idea for TEDxBellevue 2012 was born. Our theme was sustainable happiness. Now we just needed the local leaders, the decision makers, to bring together at the event. There's a few questions I always get when people find out that I'm a TEDxBellevue curator and licensee. The first question they ask is, okay, how did you actually get the license? Number 2, how long does it actually take to organize? And number 3, I'm interested in being a speaker. So just with a show of hands, I'd like to know, how many of you have organized events before? Okay, great. And how many of you have organized more than 100 people at an event? More than 500? 1,000? Okay, great. Excellent, thank you. And how many of you are familiar with TED? TED Talks? Okay, great. And how many of you are familiar with TEDx? Okay, excellent. Okay, for those who don't know in the room, what TED is, to give a context, is it's the intersection of technology, entertainment, and design. Where do those topics converge? That's how it began as a nonprofit back in 1984. And since then, it's expanded to cover any topic. And since its inception, we've had TEDx formed. The X in TEDx stands for Independently Organized Local Events. And what that means is pretty much they say, okay, you can borrow TED's brand if you follow our strict guidelines, which is things like no pitching from the stage, never have a sponsor, be a speaker, etc. And if you follow our guidelines, we'll renew your license. But other than that, off you go. And then you start from scratch, building your team, getting the funding, etc. So for me, fast forward from that moment when I discovered what my theme was going to be, we sold out the event of 120 people within 3 weeks with 12 speakers, including a 3-time Emmy Award winner, a CBS American Hero, a Purple Heart, 12 speakers, and a team of 24 volunteers, 8 of which were about core leaders, with about 60% profitability. So I'm going to share with you, how did I go from nothing to that point? I'm going to answer those 3 questions, and then also I'm going to share with you, as an event organizer professionally, what are the top 3 most common pitfalls that people make in event organizing. Okay, guys ready? Okay, great. Excellent. So, the first question is, how did you get the license? And most people, the short answer is you just go online to TED.com and you fill it out for free. And if it's under 100 people, then you get it for free. If it's not, have any of you actually attended a TED conference? Okay, great, excellent. So typically, if you're going to have an event that's over 100 people, then the requirement is that you attend a TED conference. And and it ranges from anywhere from $2,500 to $7,000 a person to attend, plus travel, plus hotel. Now, initially I thought, okay, I'm just going to build my first event. And then the only other piece around that is that, so that goes into the second question, which is, okay, how long does it actually take? So TEDx blew up so much in the third year of its inception. It's been now 5 years, it's 5 years old now. And it blew up so much that they decided to have a TEDx summit in Doha, Qatar. So all you had to do was get on a plane and then go learn for a week with all the TED staff. They trained all the organizers. So I was 7 months after my baby was born, still breastfeeding, pumping and dumping, I don't know if any of you know that term, on the plane, in the portables, in the steaming hot of Qatar. But I was learning from Laura Stein and Chris, the curators of TED. And I was at a cocktail party, gleaning everything that I could from the best. Right, the first thing I did when I first got my license was find my mentors. I connected with TEDx Oklahoma City, who's a former attorney who had just sold out a 250-person event. And then also regionally, there's about 5 TEDx organizers. And I talked to Phil Klein, who was the curator for TEDx Rainier. And they have over 1,000 to 1,500 people at their events annually. So I had those two as my mentors. And then I'm at this cocktail party, gleaning from every single organizer that I could get my hands on. Say, how did you do it? I'm talking to a guy, and I say, okay, so how long does it really take? And he says, 1,200 project hours, which is about the equivalent of 3 full-time people working for 2.5 months. I say, okay, great, good thing I got my team in place. And I'll share more about how I got that team in place a little later. But for now, that's how long it actually takes. Which brings us to our third question, and that is, okay, can I be a speaker? So how many of you in the room are aspiring TED Talk or TEDx speakers? Don't be shy, okay, great. How many of you speak for a living? Or just speak? Okay, good. And then how many of you are entrepreneurs or business owners? Okay, how many are from nonprofits? Okay, great. Retired? Excellent. Okay, great. Makes sense to the audience. Okay, great. So those are the 3 most common questions. Now, as far as speaking, it really depends. So every TEDx speaker is different, or TEDx organizer. And have any of you ever attended a TEDx event? Okay, great. All right, so first things first, is it all depends whether or not how someone gets chosen as a speaker. I like to be judicious and fair, so I always have a nomination process where the committee not only reaches out into the committee for nominations, but you can always self-nominate. And after that, we get all the speakers together. And then for our first year, we had about 65 nominations that went out. About 30 or so came back and we chose our final 12. So I always like to coach that the moment that you apply for a speaking engagement, whether you're a speaker or you're looking for a speaker, how many of you are finding speakers if you're not a speaker? There wasn't too many speakers in the room. Okay, fine. Well, you'll learn about speaking today. So initially, when you first start the application process, it's really fascinating because people, how they do one thing is how they do everything. So how they start to apply during the speaker application process is often how I can foreshadow their working relationship. And some people seem to be above it, some people cut corners, other people are very thorough. The one thing I'm always looking for is the part where I say, give me a video clip. And I always stress this is not about quality of production, it's about content. I want to see your presence, I want to see your energy, I want to see your passion for something. And so many people always bow out of that one. That's like my main criteria. and then they don't get considered because I'm like, okay, they're not going to go through the roots. How is it going to be later on? That's just one tip, is actually complete everything. It's all intended, there's no mistake with each and every question. And that's how we work with the application process. Some places it is, more of an inside connection perhaps, but I like to make sure that everybody gets a chance. Now, one other thing is that when you actually pick, as a curator, it's an art form. You want to make sure that when you are choosing what the speakers are going to be, so even if there's two people with the exact same expertise, or it's not about picking the best speaker even. It's really about how can you create the most diverse energy flow within the program. One thing I was taught in guitar is you always look at the energy arc of the whole entire program. So for example, you want to have speakers that have an arc in the middle of their talk, during their talk, and then you want to make sure there's an energy arc within each segment of the whole event, and then you want to make sure there's an energy arc of the entire event. And there's a moment where you get to you pick all the speakers and you're playing shuffle with them to see how they're going to mix and match. You don't want a scientist who's really data driven. You want to place them next to a storyteller who's inspirational and inspiring. And so with that diversity, there's a moment where it all comes together, you can see it, and that, it's like, it gels. You can see how the whole energy is going to flow. Okay, so that's a little bit on speakers. Now, the top most common pitfalls. The first one is the second year is going to be easier. You've got your email list. We had several thousand left over to spend. We had a budget now. And no, I was wrong completely. You hustle, just like anything in life. There was only about 5 people that returned the following year from the prior event. Now we sold out that second year as well. We had less time, so we sold out in a little longer time frame, but we still had the show go off. And you just want to make sure that not just that you hustle, but that you know your compelling why. So in our second year, my rallying cry was sustainable happiness. We're going to cause a shift in this. And in the second year, I actually did what TED recommends, which is you wait for all your speakers and then see what their expertise is. And from that, you then look at whether there's a general theme in which all this, subjects can amount to. But there was like no fire. And in my second year, I was like, I was spending half as much time. I had twice as many resources, way better circumstances, but I was miserable. It was a grind. And what I learned is you gotta know your compelling why. So even with knowing, if you know your compelling why, that's the thing that in those not dark hours, but in those hours when you're grinding away by yourself or with your team, that's what's going to carry you through the day. And for me, it was only once we created our next theme, which was a new reality. We created a living manifesto, we made a living document, we breathed some life into that sucker. So now you can actually have some energy when you're going out and marketing your event. The second piece, pitfall, is as far as volunteers, that you take what you can get. Sometimes it can be when you're choosing your team and they are a volunteer, you don't know how much you can really ask for from them. Here, though, that's the second pitfall, is no, you actually recruit the highest level of volunteer professionals, I call, as you can. In fact, we have a top 10 expectations for a volunteer that we give to people. That say, yeah, you're going to respond within 24 hours, you're going to just lays it out explicitly so that people are clear that you're representing a brand. I don't care if you're not getting paid. You're going to do a good job. If you want a quality event, then that's what's going to be required. So just like speakers, you want to curate the process. You want to vet as you do anything, and it's much better to have less people that are really solid than a whole bunch of people that are just going to be fillers. The final pitfall is that if you lower the ticket price, you'll get more people coming. How many for you does that seem like that would be the case? No? Yes, no, mixed. Okay. In short, exclusivity sells. I had a mentor in Oklahoma that, I had one of my volunteers, her name was Ann, and she looked me square in the eye. She's like, so you're telling me that you're going to make everybody apply. It was a pretty long process. And then only if they get accepted, you're going to make them pay another $100. I'm like, yeah. She's like, the skeptic turned into one of our best marketers. And all I did was I kept rallying, like, yes, this will sell out. I had no idea if it would, but I just kept saying that. Yes, this will sell out, this will sell out. And it actually did. And I knew because I had worked in TEDx Oklahoma, why would it not work in TEDx Seattle? Now, when I talked to my mentor from here and to all the other organizers, they had said, no, and $50 per person was the going price for this kind of event. And he looked me square in the eyes when I suggested, because I was on his sponsorship team, to learn how to raise funding. I was like, look, if you just raise it from 50 to 75, that'll provide a lot of capital for you to operate from. And he just looked back and was like, I want this to be affordable for families. No, we're not going to go higher than that. So it was bold. I was the first person in our region since 3 years ago to just break that ceiling and have that level of pricing. And it worked, right? And now other regions have followed suit within our area. So exclusivity sells. Either with the application you can do that, or with a high ticket price, or both. And then create, obviously the need in which people clamor and want to get on a waiting list. Okay, so I have on your table there's evaluation sheets on here. And I want to know from you, as part of the Q&A, what are the challenges that you have faced? Who here has ever presented for an event that was organized well or that wasn't? So that's my first question, is what are your biggest challenges that you have faced if you've organized events? What have been your lessons? Yep.
Well, I think sometimes it's hard to match what will draw people and what is a really good speaker. And, I mean, like, for example, like maybe Guy, the speaker 3 weeks ago. Like, I don't know if people were interested in seeing him, but once you saw him, he was great. And so I think sometimes that's hard, is like, you might sell a big name, and then people will come to see it, but then that big name isn't necessarily a great speaker. So it's finding that combination of people who are not only a big enough name to draw people in, but also that do deliver.
Right. Yeah. Okay, great. What about you back there?
Something like time increasing attendance to the event.
Right, how do you get the occupancy in seats? Yep. Anybody else face that one? Okay, great. Any other challenges people have? Yep.
Assuming that you're not doing 12 speakers, you're doing 1 or 2 speakers, which is probably the most frequent for both things for me. And trying to get that big name, and then do the logistics to make sure that they're scheduled. What is too early to get them on the schedule, because half the time they're going to say, well, I don't know what my schedule is, and then the other half of the population that you want as a potential speaker says, oh, that's too soon, I need a full 12 months work. So it's that balance of getting the right person with the draw, depending on if it's 100 people or 500 people, and then getting the logistics worked out to ensure that they can actually show up.
Yep. Okay, good. So timing is everything with the speaker, how to frame it so that they can actually come. Yep, what about you?
Dilution of purpose. So I'm a nonprofit, we do a lot of fundraising events, and you're going to have a podium, you're going to have a captive audience, and the purpose is fundraising, but people will say, well, let's also use it to honor board members. Let's also use it to celebrate our 25th anniversary. let's also use it to X, Y, Z, and how it goes.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you've lost your main purpose.
You'll lose the whole intention of fundraising. And do you find that in that case, then you give into all that and then you make less money, or?
I'm not shy about saying no, but there's tension.
Right.
There's tension.
What are you really here for? Well, we have to do a fundraise to keep our lights on. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Who else? Thank you.
Question.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think I understand your comment about you have to know why. We don't are able to put that into focus or how we can define that. We don't have a strong feedback or strong so what's the distillation process that you go through to figure out what you like?
Yeah. Can you guys hear him on the other side? Okay, great. So what's the distillation process to come up with your compelling why? It's visioning for me. So it's getting clear on what the core values of the event are and looking from the end. So what are the outcomes that you want from the event? What do you want the experience of the people who attend to be? What do you want the experience of the team that you're working with to be? What are your core values and what are the team's core values? And then looking from there, creating a vision or a mission for that event. And then being able to actually have that ingrained into the culture of your team. Something that was interesting was sustainable happiness was our first year, but at one point, one of my graphic designers came up to me and she said, "You said this is sustainable happiness." We're not experiencing that. Working on the team. And I had to stop, right? Because to walk our own talk, we need to ensure that the whole process along the way is going to reflect what we say that we are. And that's one of my trickiest parts to make sure. Because a lot of my event, or like I'm doing a creativity symposium for women leaders in March, and it's all about unleashing joy and creativity. So I'm always looking, how can I keep bringing those elements while we're scheduling up social media posts or whatever we're doing. But anyway, did that answer your question? Great. Any other questions?
What's the secret sauce of TED? And couldn't you be putting together events without the TED brand and still attracting people? Why TED?
So what's the secret sauce of TED being a well-known brand?
Yeah, the brand. What's the secret sauce of the brand? Why? If it's an interesting topic, why do you need TED in order to be able to present?
I don't know that you do, but there is a brand that they've created. So much like Apple, you walk in, you're expecting a certain experience. With TED, you're expecting a certain quality of vetted speakers, even though that may or may not be the case, organizer to organizer, event to event. So I don't know that the secret sauce as far as why do people clamor to TED?
I guess I'm just getting to the brand, the strength of the brand, and are there other competitive brands that are putting on events? Can one do events all by oneself without the brand? Or what do you get from the TED brand? Is there a built-in mailing list or
I wish. No. No, there's nothing. No, you become a licensee. So I think most people can start with TED. It has the model. It's actually a brilliant model because it spreads extremely quick. They just reached in 5 years over 12,000 events globally. So why TED? A lot of organizers want to start there because they give you all these parameters and guidelines and resources, a manual, so to speak, and then you can take that brand that people already know to be able to start something faster than if you have the exact same event, which I've done without the TED brand. And I would say it's easier you can get just as many people there, just as much interest, but I have to hustle in a different way. Calls and just personal relationships, meetings, networking, etc., as opposed to for TED, there is more of a traffic flow because of the brand recognition. It doesn't help you all the way, you still have to hustle, but so I think why TED? Because people want to be associated to a brand and they expect a certain experience from it.
I'm sure you can't comment on this, but I think it's very interesting because I did a TEDx talk, and before you do your TEDx talk, you have to sign all this stuff in TED that says you will never insinuate that you did a TED talk. But it is critical that whenever you talk about your involvement, that X is on there. And so it's almost like they want to keep you at arm's length. Like they want everyone to know, like, you didn't do a TED Talk, you did a TEDx talk. Like, I think that's such an interesting relationship that TED has with TEDx.
Totally. So I actually looked at the statistics. They just did a State of the TED 5-year anniversary look back. Only 0.5% since the inception of TEDx have come to TED. So half out of 12,000.
As speakers or as
Out of all the talks, only 0.5% actually make it from TEDx to TED.com. It's a very low percentage. And in the last year, it's 0.2%, even lower, almost a 0.25%. So that tells you, basically there's, when I was in India, in India, there are so many events popping up merely because of the population. I was talking to one of the ambassadors there. They can't control all the organizers over there. So they have ambassadors planted as kind of brand ambassadors to make sure that things are happening appropriately, because basically people break the rules all the time. They do their own thing, they've got 2 events going on at once, and there was so much activity they didn't know how to curb it. So you can't, in those cases, they still, I don't know if it's even under control now, so to speak. But because of that chaoticness, there's all these possibly not quality talks coming through. I mean, just imagine, right? Because anybody can be a licensee, and they range, TEDx events range from tents in Africa, like on dirt floors, to going to Antarctica as an expedition to the top of the mountain. So it really ranges. So the only way they can ensure a TED, when I know someone got chosen for a TED talk directly, that is like a whole, I don't know if you've seen the bios on these people. I mean, that's how it got known, you know, it was Al Gore, like, Bill Gates. I mean, they had very high level people initially speaking. And now it's not about great, you know, someone famous. That's not what makes a good TED speaker. And you've got to have a massive level of credentials that some TEDx's, like the very large ones, can get, like Kevin Bacon came to TEDx Midwest, or that's 3 connections. 7 degrees of that. That's what it's talking. No, and you're not allowed to give any payment. It was interesting too, because I was really wanting to hear to what the grant was. So people wanted to give books out, they wanted to speak to it, and it was just generosity. They weren't trying to sell something, but I had to be like, nope, that must be only thought leadership. I really want only thought leadership.
What were some of the topics you had last time?
At the last TEDx? Well, I had just the main themes, and the speakers spoke on, I always like to, so one was Hydrobeam. It was an inventor who had made this electric USB plug-in that you can plug into any electronic device and then use as a battery. I had Joyce Cox. She was a PhD neurophysicist that talked about her near-death experience that like glass fall on her head and still lived through it. I had a guy, a philanthropist, wealth advisor, talk about wealth in families, how by the 3rd generation, almost all of the wealth is gone, no matter where you are, what country. Rice paddy to rice paddy, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. You know, in 3 generations, all self-made people's wealth is. Anyway, so that's a little sampling. But you really, what's fun about TED that I think is distinct from any conference when somebody asks, you know, why TED, is that you have such a diversity. Usually there's such a niche when you go to a business conference and it's one kind of topic, and here it really ranges from a performer dancing on stage to a scientist to an inspirational storyteller. Something I always talk to speakers about is just, you gotta learn what is your essence, like be yourself. We would coach everybody to ensure that we knew what was coming out on stage. And you know, you've got, if you're a scientist trying to be an inspirational speaker, that's not good. Or vice versa. You're trying to add data and you just don't, you're not that kind of person. Don't try to be.
When I first went to TEDx a few years ago, what I liked about it was it gave a platform for the kind of everyday people to get their story out there.
Yes.
There's really a lot of inspiration along those lines. And so I'm wondering, is TED, is it really just kind of a community service? Because 100 people at $100 a head, and $1,200, $500, those people are $80,000. So it's not really, a money.
No, it's not that.
And so is it, how did TED get started? Was it an idea of community service, or can you tell something about the history of how it started?
I can only speak briefly on that. It started back in 1984, and it was in the beginning of 2000 that it really became mainstream, that people really knew about it. So it was very private and smaller and not as well known, and it went more viral, I think, via social media. It is owned by the Sapling Foundation, and there's, if you go through their Q&A of people who charge so much for their conferences, how are you guys paid, or there's questions like that come up, and they're just it's a nonprofit, so it's not anything super fancy. The main thing was just the intersection of technology, entertainment, design. They wanted those three topics, the TEDx, where this converged. They wanted to bring in speakers around that. And the tagline became, we want riveting talks by remarkable people that's free to the world.
So what made you want to get involved with this?
Yeah, I was interested in raising what I call social capital. So who you get to mingle with, because I get it all the time, like people just come to like, I'm going to be a TED speaker, and so you get to interact and connect with people you've never worked before. And that leads to other things, it's all connections. And that wasn't why. I knew I needed a platform. So I was passionate about, at the time, sustainable happiness. And I thought, what's going to be a platform? Thought leadership platform people know and respect. And then I just finished kind of equivalent to what an MBA program is, but on the ground. It's called Team Management and Leadership Program. And I was eager to think of something way bigger than myself that would require a team. So I had the theme, sustainable happiness. I needed something really big. I needed a platform. And I was like, oh, TED. And I was just a TED fan from watching TED Talks. And looked at the website and scoured it. Oh, I can do this. Yep.
So I know, so going back to people who want to present TEDx, is there any place that sort of accumulates all the TEDx's that are going on so you know how to apply? I get asked that a lot, like how did you get up to the TEDx? I don't know, somebody was forwarding me an email, I don't even know.
Right,
Like,
right.
if you want to really speak with a TEDx, how do you go about doing it? How do you go about finding one?
It's on the TED.com website. So you would search, you can log and become a member. They have a huge directory. And then you would search for local TEDx's in your area. You can type in my zip code. And then typically, I just know from being in the organizer community, there's only a TEDx Rainier, and the TEDx Seattle just started back up again. UW had owned the license from the digital arts school. They did nothing with it. Squatting the name. And then they released it, so a new person got to grab it. So I had to take TEDxBellevue because that was like the only. But I also have lived there for 4 years, so I knew that community wanted to serve it. And the intention is that whatever name you take is a community you actually want to nurture.
So can you take a neighborhood or?
Yeah. Any location. And then there's specifications on it. Can't be like a specific group organization or a certain region. TEDx Rainier got Rainier only, which is more of it's not really, I guess there is a city, but it's, in the beginning, it was more helter skelter, you can pick a region name. So West Side, TEDx Midwest, and now we can do that.
Give us a cost range for a day's program. What would be typical cost range?
It really ranges, literally. So you could have an event at home, live streaming with your friends, all the way up to, in the Netherlands, they hire like $100,000 marketer. They've got billboards, it's in the city, they've got several $100,000 at the biggest hall. So that one probably runs $100,000 to $200,000. Mine was around $10,000, but it was a smaller event for 100. I know TEDx Rainier ran around 40 to 50,000. They sold out King Hall. They hired, it was like 20 grand just for the editing team. Yeah.
Is that 10,000 out of your pocket? For you personally?
Yeah, I personally put myself on a line, and then I just expected to get so that was my primary way. And then I got a lot of in-kind sponsors.
And then
I would say 10,000 is what the total was for in kind, but I negotiated a lot. So I did not pay that all up front.
And then how much did you have to pay tax?
Oh, I don't pay TED anything.
Okay.
So it's a nonprofit. So I had a fiscal sponsor that I got initially, and then I paid back out of pocket, I get reimbursed, and then I had a chunk of money afterwards that I used for the next year.
So TED's not getting any income, why?
TED's not getting income. Why are they doing it? Because they want to make it more accessible to the world. They want to have local communities nurtured and organized. So TED doesn't just have its annual global meetings. It also has a TED Prize. So all that money gets funneled into funding $100,000 TEDx Prize projects. Have you guys heard of Jamie the cook? Jamie Oliver. Anyway, he was a TEDx Prize winner. The Compassion Project that we had here in Seattle with the Dalai Lama for 5 days. One of my friends was the person at TED who was running for 2 years the management of that TED Prize money. They've got lots of initiatives. TED Women, TEDx Exchange. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is very into, I don't say in bed with, but they're very instrumental in the TED Change events. So they fund a lot of scholarships for people to attend TED. They host TED Change. Melinda Gates has been a speaker numerous times on that front. Yep.
I think I checked the TEDxBellevue website. It looked like you did like repeat speaking.
No, we intended to have TEDx, their salons, which are little mini events leading up to a big event. But I don't have, we don't do that. No, I don't know. That's okay.
All right, thank you very much. Nonprofit, but to honor you for speaking to us today, we're going to donate people under 300 pounds produce to where we first harvested people. So thank you very much for coming. Right, and do we have a book today, Joe?
Anna, thank you so much for speaking to our group, and certainly you have made yourself a success by the way that you're able to speak to public. So we have a book today that is Act Like a Success, Think Like a Success, and it's a biography of Steve Harvey. You may have heard of him or seen him on TV. So if we would ask you to pick out a ticket and read the last 3 numbers.
Blue ticket. Blue ticket.
4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Take back some business. All right, and Trevor, we have a 50-50 pot today. All right.
Total's $26. The winner is going to get $13.
All right, and again, would you pull a ticket for us and read the last 3 numbers, please?
871.
871. Hey.
And we'll give it to Rotary First Harvest, as we all should.
All right. So, have a great week, and we'll have a great speaker next week. Make sure to bring some guests along, and if you could give us a heads up if you're going to bring guests, that would be appreciated. We can then count on the food. So remember, today if you see somebody without a smile, give them one of yours.
Thank you for joining us.
So Carla, is it a maiden name or a family name?
Family name.
And
Yeah.
Fowler,
Nice to meet the Fowler.
Nice to meet you.
We've got a good group in Seattle. They always get asked
It's
about.
very, it's like.
I've been asked